The Good Servant and the Bad Servant, Part 3. Hi again. How are you? I'm good. Are you ready to learn more of God's Word? Awesome. Let's get started. I'm still on Matthew chapter 24, verse 45 to 51. Let's read again. The same New Living Translation. A faithful, sensible servant is one whom the master can give responsibility of managing his other household servants and feed them. Verse 46. If the master return and find that the servant has done a good job, there will be a reward. Verse 47. Jesus said, I tell you the truth. The master will put that servant in charge of all he owned. Verse 48. But what if the servant is evil and thinks, my master won't be back for a while? Verse 49. And he began beating the other servant, partying and getting drunk. Verse 50. The master will return unannounced and unexpected. Verse 51. And the master will cut the servant to pieces and assign him a place with the hypocrites. In that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Okay, it's very interesting in New King James Version translation. It says in verse 50, the master of that servant will come on a day when he is not looking for him. Very interesting. There's a difference. The word than the New Living Translation, what it says. There's different. That's very interesting. In New Living Translation, it says with a different word, which is unannounced and unexpected. That's different. Okay, let's look at the word for expect. The Greek word for expect is prosdako. The Greek definition: look when state of expect, tarry, waiting, looking forward, being in expectation, waited for, expecting, waited, looking, waiting for. It's interesting definition. Their definition. Number one, to expect, rather in thought, in hope, or in fear. Number two, to look for, wait for. Okay? In New King James Version, the translation says, quote, the master of the servant will come on a day when he is not looking for him, and at an hour that he is not aware of. That match the description in the Greek definition with the word looking for and waiting for. That match. Are you with me so far about this? It's clear description, right? Good. Okay, let's look at the Greek word for cut, shall we? It's a very interesting word. The Greek word for cut is dichotomo. The Greek definition, cut, pieces, cut, sunder, cut asunder. Cut in asunder. Wow. The definition, number one, to cut into two parts. A, of the cruel method of punishment used by the Hebrews and others of cutting one in two. Number two, cut up by scourging, scourged severely, cut, scourging. In other words, to cut in asunder means to leave you behind, to cut you off, asunder. That's what it means. I will explain about this in more detail later at the end of this lesson. Then you will understand why Jesus said this in this parable. Okay? Okay, the last part of this verse, which is verse 51. Let's look at the Greek word for gnashing. The Greek word for gnashing is brigmos. The Greek definition is very simple. Gnashing, gnashing. The definition, number one, gnashing of teeth. A, used to denote from extreme anguish and utter despair of men, consigned to eternal punishment in hell. And that's A. Number two, snarling, growling, in sense of biting, not in sense of biting, like an animal. No, that's okay. But for this verse 51, number two fits the description in verse 51. I'll tell you why in detail later at the end of the lesson. Bear with me. Okay? How do I know this? Okay, let's look at Amplified version that describes this clearly in verse 51. Okay? Matthew chapter 24, verse 51, Amplified version. And will cut him in two and put him with the hypocrites in that place there will be weeping, parentheses, over sorrow and pain and grinding of teeth over distress and anger. Angry, why am I here? Why? That many different ways, but still, you're angry. Okay? Clear? That's very clear. Okay? So that makes more sense in this amplified version. I will get to the point after I explain the rest of the parable. Why did Jesus use this parable? Okay? Good. First of all, the parable of the good servant and the bad servant is still connected to the next parable of the 10 virgins. That's why when I say, at first, I did not understand this parable clearly, there are 2 reasons that I believe about why this parable is not mentioned or omitted. Number 1, the reason is that they probably do not understand why Jesus said this in that parable. That's number 1. Probably they did not understand. Why cut asunder? Why? Did not understand. Okay? Number 2. Reason is that they might know what this parable is talking about, but don't want to talk about it or teach it, this parable, at all. That's just my opinion. Until Reverend Perry Stone understood this parable clearly, and of course, Pastor Joseph Prince also understood this. Only these 2 men who understood the parable that I know of. I don't know about the others. Are you with me so far? Oh, fabulous. Are you ready to learn about this parable? Okay. First of all, the parable of the good servant and the bad servant is... Hold on, I've lost my place. Oh, okay. I thought I repeated it. No, it's kind of, but I'm still emphasizing, okay? So bear with me. First of all, this parable of the good servant and the bad servant is still connected to the parable of the 10 virgins. Why? Because the first parable affected or influenced the parable of the 10 virgins. What the 2 different servants, the good servant, bad servant, did affected the 10 virgins. The 5 wise virgins and the foolish 5 affected by these 2. Okay? And that's why there's still connection between this 2 parable. Are you with me so far? Good. Good. Here's the question for you. Who is the good servant? Good question, right? Let's look at the Greek word for the servant. Greek word for servant is diakonos. The Greek definition. You ready for this? Minister, pastor, servant, deacon, deaconess, servant. The pastor, minister, okay? There's definition. Number one who exactly follow the commands of another, especially of master, a servant, attendant, minister, the servant of a king. Now, we know who the servant is. It's a minister or pastor. That's who. Okay? Now this is so important. Truly pay heed to this message. Okay? The good servant is a pastor who is well prepared by taking responsibility of ministering his master's other household servants and feed them. Okay? Now what does that mean is that the pastor who specifically follows the commands of another, especially of the masters, that's Jesus himself. The pastor follows what Jesus teaching, what he says, what he commands. That's what this says, okay? The pastor take care of another servant. Now, question. Who are other servants? That the believing in the church. That's us. And the other servant, the pastor, taking care of those believers. Clear? Good. With me so far about the pastor and other servant? Good. How does the pastor take care of our other servant? By feeding them. What does that mean? By feeding them means the pastor is responsible to feed them spiritual food with the accurate information in God's Word. The pastor is responsible to follow Jesus' command on what he wants the pastor to teach the believers with the accurate information. By what? Look at the Greek and Hebrew language. Also, the pastor believes in all the prophet and God promise. Also, the good servant believes that Jesus is the Messiah and that he is the one that died for them and for their sin. Also, believing Jesus is the Son of God and has risen from the dead, the grave, or dead. Are you with me so far about the good servant? Great. Okay, let's stop here. I will continue this parable in the next video with more detail. Are you blessed? Awesome. Have a blessed and safe weekend. See you next time. Bye.